So everything seems to be going along real good. Other than that, I don't know a whole lot that's going on. Thanks, Kenny Wayne Tripp, for filling in for me here. But hopefully we're going to go ahead and continue on with this until we get through Isaiah and, with no more detours. Before we get going, let's have a word of prayer. Walter, would you mind reading our prayer this morning? Amen. All right. There's chapter 31 threw me for a loop. I got thinking about it when I first started getting into it. Only 9 verses. How am I going to stretch that out for 45 minutes and get into it? Well, I figured, we do just get into it a little bit deeper than we normally do. And so as we get into this, when you think of Isaiah and his relationship with Judah and God and what have you, I don't know about you, but when I think of Isaiah, I kind of picture him as a fellow who's walking around on the rooftops, looking at all the mess going on in Jerusalem, paying attention to everything that's happening. And, he weeps over Jerusalem. He struggles with the leadership, struggles with the priesthood, struggles with the people. Everything going on around him seems to be full of sin, and they want to trust other people besides God. And so Isaiah is really wrapped up in how he's going to handle this situation. The people of Jerusalem at this time, I can almost picture them sitting on the wall and everything else and looking at old Sennacherib's army as they're getting out here, struggling, surrounding the city, getting their ramparts up, and going to knock down the walls and everything else. The people, you'd think they would be terrified, and I'm sure they were, but you'd think they turned to God. And that's not what the case has been. And so, remember, King Hezekiah of Judah is the one who is in power at this time. And when we look at Hezekiah, we see that before he got in there, Sargon of Assyria had come in, and he was taking all those little communities around there. Well, he's dead now. And what happened was the Assyrian Empire had grown. And so we have Sennacherib in here now. And the Assyrian Empire, if you look at the map over there, it's got that darker cream color there. That's all of Assyria. And if you look in the boxes, you see places like Israel, and Sidon, and Tyre, Damascus, Judah, gets over to Egypt, Heliopolis, Thebes, all of that down here. Those in the boxes there are little vassal states. When Sargon had come in, he had taken these things over, and they were having to pay tribute to Assyria. And they were trying to form a coalition, or Judah was trying to form a coalition with all these little towns, and go up against Sennacherib when he comes in, And that they were trying to look down for Egypt to do this. Now, in Egypt, you have a fellow by the name of Sabaka, 25th dynasty of Egypt. He is a Cushite. He's not a regular Egyptian. He's a Cushite. And at this time, there's two. You have the kingdom of Cush and the kingdom of Egypt. And he is a Cushite who has come up here, and they have taken over. He's the ruler over Egypt now. Thinks he's a pretty powerful dude. He's got a pretty good army, and lots of chariots and lots of warriors and archers and everything else. And it's kind of like the bully in school who is flexing his muscles. And, there's always somebody who's bigger than the bully. And but what's happening is all these little vassal states are turning toward Sabaka and trying to form this coalition that says, when we get everything together, we're going to be able to beat this guy, all right? Now, Sennacherib of Assyria he's a pretty mean dude. When he takes over a place, very seldom does he just leave the population alive. They torture them, they behead them, they disembowel them, they put them on stakes. They do all sorts of things to them, and the fear tactics. And I'll guarantee you, when you use that sort of fear tactics, you've got people's attention, and you can beat them into submission pretty quick. And that's kind of like the guy Sennacherib was. Now, over in Isaiah 30, verse 3 through 5, therefore shall the strength of Pharaoh be your shame. This is what God is saying to the people of Judah. The strength of Pharaoh, all those chariots, all the army, all the things that he has are going to be your shame. And the trust on the shadow of Egypt, and the trust cast the shadow of Egypt on your confusion. For his princes, which talk about Egypt, his princes were Zorro, and his ambassadors came to Hades, and they were all ashamed of the people that could not profit them, nor be a help nor profit, but a shame and also a reproach. What he's saying, he went out to help people, Zor and Hades and what have you, but those little communities he couldn't make any money off of it. He was kind of like being a mercenary and what have you. And truth be known, he couldn't have helped them anyhow. And this is what God is saying about the Sennacherib, that God is in control, not Egypt, okay? And so what's happened now is Sennacherib has come in, and along the Mediterranean, if you go back to that little map over here, if I can get to it here real quick, should have put it up there again. Along the Mediterranean, you've got Sidon and Tyre and Megiddo and Samaria, places like that. Of course, Samaria is already gone, but the Israel is gone. But along that coastline on the Mediterranean, he has gone in and he is taking them one by one and wiping them all out, okay? And so in doing that, he is destroying or dismantling the coalition that they are trying to establish, but yet they still try to do it. All right, so here's where we're going to go into. We're going to walk this text line by line and draw out a few words out of it, okay? Look at chapter 31, verse 1. Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help, who rely on horses, who trust in the multitude of their chariots and the great strength of their horsemen, but do not look to the Holy One of Israel or seek help from the Lord. So here's another one of those woes. We're still in that woe section of Isaiah. Another one of those woes. Those who go down to Egypt and rely on the horses and what have you. Now there's an irony in what Isaiah has just communicated here in this verse. And the irony is this. Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help. Remember what Egypt was to Israel? Israel was in bondage in Egypt, and God had to deliver them from Egypt. But now what is happening is Israel or Judah is going back down to Egypt and trying to get them some help. God has already destroyed Egypt at one time. But what's happening is now, instead of paying attention, well, God did that, he took care of us here. They're not even looking at God. They're looking back at the ones who had them in bondage to take care of them. And that doesn't make any sense at all to me, does it? Okay? So they're forming all these coalitions with Egypt and all these other little nations and leaving God completely out of the picture. So what we see here is that they're doing all this, but notice that word, they don't look to the Holy One of Israel. They don't seek help from the Lord. That word, look to, Riyah. It's a participle. It means it's an ongoing thing, all right? It's an ongoing action, but there's something unique about this one. It's looking forward and it's looking backward there in the sentence, okay? Both places. It's going like this, it's a pull back and forth. And that pull, sometimes it leads this way, sometimes it leads that way. And right now they've got more of them on the side pulling toward Egypt, okay? So they're looking at all the chariots and all the archers, all the power of Egypt, and they're going to be the ones that protects us from Sennacherib. That's what they're saying. We're looking at him, leaving God out of the picture. You've rejected the Holy One of Israel. You're looking at that rather than you're looking at God. And what that amounts to, folks, is you are a dunce. All right? How ignorant can you be? And apparently Judah was pretty ignorant at this time because they're looking for the things of man rather than looking for the things of God, okay? It's kind of like these are the guys that are out there loading the sandbags in front of a dam. And the engineer who built the dam knows it's going to hold back the river, knows it's powerful and everything else, and he cannot believe that these people were so frightened and everything and loading their sandbags. That's what Israel is doing. They're going to Egypt to load the sandbags when God's got control of the dam. Okay? And so they're making a terrible mistake in rejecting God. Verse 2. Yet he too is wise and can bring disaster. And he doesn't take back his word. He will rise up against that wicked nation, against all those who help evildoers. Now, what he's talking about, they're thinking that Egypt's full of wise people, they know how to handle this. God said, wait a minute, I'm wise, and I can bring disaster. And I've already told you I can take care of you. I'm not backing up on my word. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to rise up against that wicked nation, against those who help the evildoers. Okay? All those who are in league with Egypt trying to combat the Assyrians, instead of coming to me, I'm going to take care of them as well, all right? Remember King Solomon. What was he known for? Wisdom, right? Yeah. Known for his wisdom. Well, you get over to Egypt, as a matter of fact, over in 1 Kings 4:30, Solomon's wisdom was greater than all the wisdom of all the people of the East, and greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. That's one of God's people, right? But what's happening here is now Egypt has all the wisdom. Anybody ever hear of the library in Alexandria? The library in Alexandria, it's a shame if they burnt that up, all right? Because it contained all sorts of history, all sorts of things that were going on. When they torched it, we lost a lot of history and a lot of information. Probably even lost on how they built the pyramids. But anyway, that's a different story. But the point is, God said, no, wait a minute. God's wise, and God can bring disaster. I don't care how smart Egypt thinks they are, is what God is saying. So Yahweh's wisdom, in this verse, he said, that eclipses all these sages over in the Nile area, all right? And when it comes to them compared to one another, they are all dunces, okay? Their wisdom is like a kindergartner compared to God's education, all right, what God can do. And that's what God is trying to get over to the Judah right now, is you're going to the wrong people, okay? Verse 3. In verse 3, the Egyptians are what? Mortal. They're not God. Their horses are flesh and not spirit. And when the Lord stretches out his hand, those who help will stumble. Those who are helped will fall. All will perish together. So what he's saying, when you look at this, what's taking place here, he's got a contrast going on. And this contrast, the Egyptians are mere mortals, and where there is an they're mortal, they're not God. Okay, when you put them up against one another, there's a big difference between mankind and God. And then he goes over and he says, look, their horses are flesh, bashar, they're not ruach, they're not spirit. And so he's got this contrast of what's going on here. And what the contrast is, you're looking at man-made flesh, you're not looking at God and spirit, and everything you're doing is on the physical side. You're placing the spiritual side, you're placing God on the back burner, you're not looking at that. And so what we have here is Judah's folly. They are a bunch of ignorant people who are doing dumb things and in rejecting their God and going down to the people they think can help. Flesh and blood cannot help. We'll see that in a little bit again. Verse 4. And I'm not sure we're going to make 45 minutes out of this. This is what the Lord says to me. As a lion growls, a great lion over his prey, and as though a whole band of shepherds is called together against it, it's not frightened by their shouts or disturbed by their clamor. So the Lord Almighty will come down to do battle on Mount Zion against his heights. Again, what we have here is a metaphor. And this metaphor is the lone lion, kind of growls over his prey. What's a lion weigh? 600-800 pounds? Something like that. Less lion was going after your puppy dog. And you went after it with a stick. And he looked up at you and growled at you and showed them teeth. Would you continue going toward the lion? Don't think so? I'd choke him with heel dust, Run. That's what you do. That's what God is saying here. You got the lion growling over his prey. Assyria is doing what? Assyria is roaring. We are the big boys on the dock, okay? We're going to be able to take over everything. But what happens is they're the shepherd. God is the lion. God roars louder. The shepherd can yell at the lion, but the lion, when he growls, vibrates the entire insides of everything. That's what God is saying here. I'm the one who is in control. I am the strong one. I am the one who can run off the adversary, all right? Verse 5. Like birds hovering overhead, the Lord Almighty will shield Jerusalem. He will shield it and deliver it. He will pass over it and rescue it. Now he shifted around saying, look, you'll be going to try to go to Egypt to get all this done, but you're looking at the wrong people. I am going to be the one to do it. And he's using this idea of another metaphor. He is a bird, like a bird fluttering over his people, God is the one who is doing this. He uses the participle. And the idea is that God is shielding them like a bird fluttering. He is continuously in that shielding action. All they have to do is come to him. Now, God is going to take care of them. Yeah, they're going to wind up going into captivity later on because of, the Babylon. But Sennacherib and his Assyrian army are not going to be able to take him. Why? Because of the continuing action and protection of God. They were going to Egypt. God says, I'm going to handle it. Egypt's not going to be able to do anything. Well, how do I know Egypt's not going to handle it? Well, you got echoes of things going on here. And the echo is this. God is going to be shielding them. And remember how at the, over in Exodus 12, at Passover, when they placed the blood on the doorposts and what have you, okay? When they placed the blood over the doorpost, what happened to the angel of death? Did he bypassed them, right? Just bypassed them. And so why? Because the blood was taking care of it. God devised a way that would shield them from the judgment that he was bringing upon the land of Egypt once again, right? And so that brings echoes to it. God is shielding and taking care of these people. Verse 6. Return, you Israelites, to the one you have so greatly revolted against. Once again, we have God saying, I am going to bring judgment. Egypt can't help you. They are coming, but all you have to do is repent. All you have to do is return, you Israelites. Why? Because you are revolted against me. Now, there are several different things that we've noticed all throughout the book of Isaiah and Jeremiah. The revolt against God is amazing in some ways. We sit there and clasp our hands over our faces and say, how could they do this? They took God, placed him on the back burner. They got so wrapped up in idolatry, they assimilated with the nations around them. Can you imagine being so caught up in religion that you take your children out to the valley of Gehenna and sacrifice them to Molech? And as you're sitting there watching and listening to the screams of those babies as they fall into that fire, you're praising the god Molech. Now that's weird. Can you imagine going to the grove on the high places and worshiping Asherah, a pagan ritual that involves fornication, and saying, "Oh, this is good"? Can you imagine going to the temple of God and engaging with prostitutes? But yet, this is what they were doing. God, we're going to commit all these sins out here with all these false gods and everything, but we're still going to worship you the way we want to worship you. And see, that telegraphs over to God's people today, doesn't it? I mean, yeah, we don't get involved in all the sins of the flesh. Some might, you know. But for the most part, I think most people are honest and don't get involved in all of that. However, there are other things that we get involved in, and we don't pay attention to it. And I think that's what was happening to Israel. They weren't paying attention to what was going on. As a matter of fact, they grew up in that sort of an environment. And when you grow up in that sort of environment, everything seems like it's normal. You take a child who grows up in a home where there's arguing and fighting and violence every time you turn around. That child grows up, and 9 times out of 10, he thinks that's the way it's supposed to be. And so he just carries on the cycle over and over and over. You take a child who grows up with alcoholic parents. Boy, unless he breaks the cycle, what happens to him? I can say that even in my own family, my extended family, with Nina, her father, bless his heart, he was an alcoholic. He drank, I'm not lying here, 24 bottles of white port wine a day. A day. Okay? The last time I saw Tommy, Kenny Wayne was 3 years old. And Kenny Wayne was playing on the floor. And he came around the corner and almost tripped all over Kenny Wayne. He called him a bad name. And I picked Kenny Wayne up and took Nina. We got in the car. That's the last time I saw Tommy until I saw him at his funeral. Okay? He died at 42 years old with cirrhosis of the liver. Okay? Nina's half-brother, Sammy. He was 23 years old. He died of cirrhosis of the liver. You know, I mean, the cycle just goes on until it is broken, all right? And that's the tragedy of it. So what God is saying is, return to me, break the cycle. What have you done? You've revolted against me. You've done all these things, O Israel. And the message is to us, if we have put God on the back burner in our lives and anything, that's a revolt. And God continuously begs us to come back to Him, because someday, just like He did with Assyria, there's going to be judgment, and we need to be aware of that. All right? Now, there's a little weird Hebrew in this verse. And what I mean by weird, there's two direction verbs in a single breath. Okay? So what he's doing, he uses the word Sheba. It's a Cal imperative. That doesn't mean anything to you. But it means turn back, come home. All right? You guys need to turn back and come home. And then he uses one. Why? Because you turned aside, you deviated. Okay, you defected. And you've revolted. That's what the word revolted means there. And so what he's talking about, he's kind of like juggling mirrors. You know, and it's a mirror image. Their past action was what? Well, kind of like they veered off the road. You ever done that, Les? You know? Yeah. You know, you're going down the road. You veered off the road, and that what happened is they veered off the road. They did a detour around God. And what God is saying, look, the call now is, sir, you take that wheel, you swing it back, and you merge back into my lane. All right. In other words, what you guys do is kind of like your GPS in your car. What happens when you pass up where you're supposed to turn? recalculating, you know, and then it says, it tells you, recalculate, it'll tell you to do what? Make a legal U-turn first place you can, right? Well, that's what God's doing here. We've recalculated, and you guys need to make a U-turn and return back to me. Kind of a word play. It's the same journey, but it's opposite motions on the same journey. It's kind of like, we're going this way, and God says, no, you need to turn around and come back, all right? And so one is describing this spiritual lane drift, and the other one is describing a corrective turn. It demands it. You've got to turn around. And you've drifted so far off the beaten path. Now's the time to turn around. You've got the opportunity to do that, okay? Okay, verse 7. In that day, every one of you will reject the idols of silver and gold your sinful hands have made. When? In that day, when you finally make that turn around, when you finally come back to me, when you finally do these things, you're going to do that. In that day, all right? Judah, that day is going to become 701 BC. Remember what happened there? Isaiah 37:6. We've already mentioned this a couple of times. Sennacherib's army is out there. Egypt didn't take on Sennacherib's army. They couldn't. So what happens? God sends an angel out there, and that angel, in one night, 185,000 people he killed. One angel, 185,000. What happened? Next morning, they woke up. I love the King James Version again. It says when they woke up, when they got up next, no, it says they woke up the next morning dead, or something along that line. You know, all these were dead when the next morning came up. That's the whole point. Sennacherib lost all of his army, and so what happens? He packs up and goes back to Assyria. God took care of it. When? In that day. That's a future day, but he does it in that day. So what happens, those people who have been going over here to Egypt and trying to get these treaties together and make this coalition, what happened, at that time, they're going to realize that God alone is their salvation. Egypt didn't have anything to do with it. God was their shield. He was the one, like the fluttering wings of the bird, taking care of them, okay? Your definition of security changes forever. You're sitting in a house, there's a hurricane coming, and you say, I'm safe. You get up the next morning and find a boat in your tree. You realize that boat could have been in your house. Walter, you get up the next morning and see a lawnmower in the tree. And security was wiped out real quick, wasn't it? Which one got that? Which hurricane, do you remember? Huh? Christine? Okay, Katrina. All right. So, you know, that is awful. But security can be taken away like that. And it changes once you see disaster coming. Okay? In that day, what happens in that day, what's going to happen? Well, in that day, you're going to reject the idols of silver. You're going to reject Baal. You're going to reject Ra. You're going to reject Asherah. You're going to reject all these various idols that your hands have made. All right? And there's going to come a time. Reject is too nice a word. All right? That's not exactly what he's saying here. Okay. The Hebrew word means you're going to despise it. You're going to spit it out. It's kind of like, hey, have you ever eaten something that made you so sick you had to go do homage to the portion from the king? You know? Yeah, I think all of us have been there sometime or another, right? And that's what it means. You're going to despise it. You're going to spit it out. You're going to become sick of it. And 1 Samuel 8, verse 7, it says, the Lord told him, listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not that they have rejected you, but they have rejected me as their king. They have despised me as their king. They have gotten sick of me as their king. That's when he was putting Saul in his, established him as a king. God says, you rejected me. You don't like my leadership, all right? And so flip that around. The same people who once despised God are now going to despise their idols. That's what God is telling them here in this verse. You despised me, you got your own king, you rejected me, you set up all your own idols, and guess what? There's going to come that time when you come back to me and those idols, you're going to hate them, they're going to disgust you, they're going to make you sick. Any of y'all ever have a puppy? I remember when kids used to beg me, oh, Daddy, can we have a puppy? Can we do this? Can we do that? Yeah, we can get one. And what's the first thing that happens when I see you tell them, you take care of your puppy, but you're going to have to be the one to take care of it. Okay? You're going to have to feed it. No problem. You're going to have to water it. No problem. Guess what? What happens then? Right? When they have to clean up after the puppy, that's a whole different story. And so that's what we're saying here over in Isaiah 30, verse 22. He says, you're going to desecrate your idols overlaid with silver and your images covered with gold. You're going to throw them away like a minstrel cloth and say to them, away with you. That's the idea of despising the idols. That's what God says. You treated me like this. You despise me, but you're going to flip around and you're going to despise those idols. They're going to be the ones that are going to be the subject of your loathsomeness, okay? The word moss. It's get this thing away from me. That's how you're going to feel, all right? That's how you're going to be. All these idols. Okay, verse 8. Assyria will fall by no human sword. Now, we've already telegraphed that, right? A sword not of mortals will devour them. They're going to flee before the sword, and their young men will be put to forced labor. Now, as I said, we telegraphed that. That's going to happen in the future. No human sword is going to do this. Egypt can't do it. The coalition can't do it. Judah surely can't do it by themselves. Human beings can't do it. Human beings, if you go up with a force a third the size of Assyria's army, you're going to lose. Bottom line. Unless you had AK-47s, But your chariots don't outnumber theirs. Your archers don't outnumber theirs. Your foot soldiers don't outnumber theirs. You will lose. So there has to be somebody to step in. And God says, I'm going to step in. Remember over the Exodus? Moses parted the Red Sea, or God parted the Red Sea with Moses raising his staff. And the Israelites walk across on dry ground. And the Pharaoh comes. And he's chasing them down. He's right between the two walls of water. What happens? God cripples the chariots. He freezes the wheels on them. He sticks them in the mud and everything else. And they can't move. All right? They can't go anywhere. They're stuck between the walls of water. That's what that phrase is mirroring here. So during the last watch of the Lord, over in Exodus, I can't see it now, he looked down for a pillar of fire and a cloud of Egypt's army and threw it into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariots, so they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptian says, let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord's fighting against Egypt. Right? Wow. Let's get away from it. God got the Egyptians' attention. He got the Assyrians' attention too, didn't he? I mean, the angel, 185,000 Assyrians died in one night by one angel. Don't ever think you can win a spiritual warfare by yourself, folks. You got to have God. All right. Any way you slice it. Verse 9. Their stronghold will fall because of terror. At the sight of the battle standard, their commanders will panic, declares the Lord, whose fire is in Zion, whose furnace is in Jerusalem. All righty. Stronghold. Their stronghold will fall. What are we talking about here? Literally, the Selah, it means a rocky crag. What happens, the armies of Syria, they would go when they took over a place and there were mountains and what have you, they'd dig holes in the mountains and make fortresses and fortify themselves. So what happens in your versions, they'll often translate this Selah This rocky crag, they'll translate that as a stronghold. That's what we're talking about. But literally, it was a hidey hole for the people, for the army, where people couldn't get to them. Y'all remember the here in America, the Pueblo Indians? Okay, you ever been to Pueblo, Colorado, by any chance? You have, Dixie? I remember we went on vacation. We stopped by Pueblo one time, and my mother was with us, and she's terrified of high places. And can you picture me? At that time, I think I weighed 130 pounds. Mom was, 4'11", little tiny thing. And we were trying to get her to climb one of those ladders to go up into the Pueblo and look around. And she's scared to death. I got her on my shoulders, and I'm pushing her up like this. And it was a comedy. We put on a show. But we got her up there. But that's the way the Pueblos were. They built their stuff in the side of those mountains and what have you, and nobody could get to them. That was the beautiful part about that. That's what these guys are doing. They would build things inside these rocky crags, and nobody could get to them. All right? So the rock stronghold can point to three directions at once in this thing here. Number one, the rocks, it's literal fortification. That's what it could mean. All right? But it also could mean Sennacherib, that he was the rock that the soldiers leaned on. What happens when you kill the king in a battle? Well, let's bring it over here. What happens when you kill the chief in the Indian warfare? They run. They turn around. Why? Because the leadership's gone. In the Revolutionary War, we figured that out. And that's when they started taking out all the officers, the British, because everybody was in chaos, didn't know what to do. So same thing here. Sennacherib was known as the Rock, right? And his soldiers ran. Also, Assyria's god Asher, foreign nations call their god a rock. All right? So it could be any of those things. But what happens, the rock is going to fall. Go back over here. The stronghold, the rock, is going to fall because of terror. Whether it's Sennacherib, whether it's their fortresses, or whether it's their gods, you can mean every one of them. They are going to fall at the sight of this battle that is coming. Everybody's going to be terrified. Okay? So, in conclusion here, y'all remember Rita when it hit? Okay? Katrina wasn't as bad here as it was down in New Orleans area. Okay? But when Rita hit, that was a different story. We got a pretty good deal about Rita. I remember we left when Lily hit, and I ran into tornadoes in Dallas, So we decided to stay when Rita hit. And I'm out here, and you probably go over here and look on the side of this roof over here. During the middle of Rita, I was out here with a ladder and some nails trying to get this awning from tearing off completely from the roof of this building. But we still had to have a lot done, didn't we? Okay? So when Rita hit, we all prepared, and we prepared in different ways, didn't we? You had the batten down crowd. That's when we get out here and we're putting on the boards, everything else on our windows and what have you. And it's logical, logically we say, well, I'll do what I can, but only God can take care of this wind, We're going to ride it down and batten it down and stay. Then you had to get out of town crowd. And to get out of town crowd says, I can outrun this storm with my valuables, everything's going to be fine, okay? You had both sides. And neither one was right, neither one was wrong, It just depends on your ideas. But what happens, he's telling a modern parable here. Or that is a modern parable here that I'm trying to get over. External fortifications matter, but they're not enough. Just like putting boards on our windows wasn't enough. Roof still got beat up, right? Shingles were gone, places got flooded, leaking in the buildings, All these things are happening here. The fortifications are fine, but they're not enough. And that's what God is saying. You can have all these external fortifications around you, but that's not going to be enough. What happens is the calm comes when your soul's foundation is that rock. When your trust is completely in God, that way no cyclone can take it away. No army can defeat you when your trust is in God. Okay? All right. That's it. We're done. Like that car. Okay? Next week, 32 more verses. Okay. Any questions, comments? Thank you much. Oh, I can't hardly